Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Health Made Simple Show. I'm your host, Dr. Bart, and today we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. We're going to do a deep dive about brain health, and while you're listening to this, you notice that I might have a little bit of edge in my voice, it's probably real. Reason is that for the most part, through the course of my career and a personal story, which I'm going to share with you today, when I start talking about brain health, it gets really personal for me, not only for what I'm going to share with you about my experience in my personal life, meaning my family, my younger brother's life, but also as I watch every day what's going on with people with different medications and drugs and things that are being told that no big deal here, no big deal there, and it's literally robbing them of their ability to experience this thing that we call life. So if you hear a little bit of edge, no apologies are coming because it is a little bit edgy for me. And I'm sending this one out for everyone out there who maybe you've been diagnosed in the past with ADD, ADHD, you name it. You've got brain fog. You're having some memory issues. You have a hard time concentrating, any of the above. And you think, man, maybe there's something wrong with me, or is there something going on with my brain? Listen, I would tell you this. We all should have, to some degree, a good, responsible kind of fear, maybe, if you want to call it, but a responsible level of concern about the future of our brains and our brain health. I know this, that if we don't have our brain health, we don't have much. So that is why I think a respectable amount of concern and understanding of how your brain operates should be top of the list when it comes to being healthy and vital. So keep doing the thing, keep sharing it out. And by the way, whatever y'all are doing, it's working. So if you're one of the ones out there that are helping to spread the word, sharing the love here, just keep doing your thing. We're having more and more people show up. We're having more and more people reach out, which means that we're having impact. So thank you for your participation in that. So keep sharing it out, keep spreading the love. So with that being said, we'll talk about brain health today. Now, no matter what I say here today, recognize also that I'm not diagnosing you with anything, and I'm also not telling you to take any course of medical action. So if you have a certain thing that you're doing with your body, your health, your brain, you're taking meds or drugs, whatever, so be it. This is about brain health, even though I'm going to talk at times about very specific symptoms so you can have a better understanding or maybe even relate a little bit better to them or the people that you're going to try to help and serve. So this applies to anybody and everyone, even if you do not have any of those labeled diagnoses like ADD and ADHD and stuff like that. So, all right. So buckle down. We're gonna rock and roll here a little bit. So, first of all, let's just discuss some of the symptoms. This is kind of funny. I remember when the first time I was way back, about 30 years ago in school, when we were doing differential diagnosis and trying to find out who has things like ADD and ADHD. And I will tell you this, every single one in the class said, yep, I got it, because it was basically a checklist of symptoms that you checked off. And we were like, yes, I have those things. I have an inability to focus. I have a hard time with, multitasking. I at times have impulsive behaviors. I get irritated easily. I lack motivation at times. All of these different symptoms can be, when we put them all together, squeezed in, and then pops out a label, a tattoo that you or me or someone else might get called ADD or ADHD. Most of the time, it is unfortunately being diagnosed in preschools. And during that time, what happens is you have a kid who's being a kid, like me, like you. Now, back in my day, so I'm in my 50s now, back in my day, they didn't use that diagnosis. So nobody in my class was diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. Therefore, no one got drugged up and medicated and dumbed down. So what we just got in trouble. We just had to sit in the back of the room. We had to stand with our nose against the wall during recess, but it was no big deal. No one got labeled and tagged through the course of life. As time goes and people didn't like certain behaviors in class, our teachers literally started sending kids home, Johnny home or Bart home or you home, saying to the parents, your kid doesn't behave well. He fidgets all day long. He speaks out of turn. He does all the things. And I'm joking because that's what kids do. That's what they're designed to do. And then next thing you know, we'll say, well, parents says, well, I don't know what to do. And they maybe try to correct some behaviors. Johnny, Bart, don't do that. Telling you, oh, we got to behave better. And then they keep failing these modifications, or they start to fail the normal fit-in policy. So then they get tagged, enabled, and then eventually tattooed with a diagnosis, ADD, hyperactive, whatever it may be. And then they load them up on medications and send them on their way. And this is for a lot of people where the problems begin. Now, does this happen as adults? Absolutely. Adult onset ADHD and stuff like that, we're gonna discuss that, no doubt, is through the roof. And unfortunately, we're doing the same, what I think are poor actions to try to correct problems that have an entirely different root cause. So what are some of the symptoms? What are the traditional therapies that they're doing, traditional therapies that they do for the hyperactive child sitting in class? And this is exactly what they've done with my younger brother, Chad. Let him rest in peace. He's no longer with us. Amazing young man. And when he was young, he got labeled with this diagnosis, ADD, ADHD. I forget which one, or both, or all of the above. Anyways, they put him on Ritalin. And I remember very specifically what happened, that all of a sudden Chad started to fit in, meaning he clicked the boxes. He wasn't hyperactive. He would sit there and just look dumb. He literally just looked dumb. Mouth open a little bit, drugged him up enough where he just stared forward and didn't misbehave. And we think, man, how could you do that? How could your family do that to him? That's what's happening all across America, folks. That's what the doctors are telling us to do. Shut them down, dumb them down. And it's confirmed by many of the teachers. So if you're a teacher out there, listen, I'm not poking on you, but I'm calling it the way that it is. This is how it's it's really shaken down. The teacher's saying, this kid's interrupting my class. So we got to do something different. And if we drug them down, dumb them down, then it works out pretty good. Anyways, so after observing this as a young man, so I'm only 18, 20 years old at the time. My brother and I had a pretty big age gap. I was probably 16, 17 years older than him. So I was kind of in that fatherly figure for him. I recognized, and I remember this day very specifically. Maybe when you were young, your mom did the same thing as us. My brothers and I, we had this wall where every year my mom put our pictures that we'd get at school on the wall. So there's, and you had all your funny haircuts and clothes that you wore and all that kind of fun stuff. Anyways, I would look at the ones from my younger brother. I remember coming home from school, from college, and then from chiropractic school, and looking at this wall and seeing something so clear. It was mind-boggling to me that when he was on the medications for these 6-7 years that he was on the Ritalin and the drugs, his school pictures, he just sat there and he looked numb and dumb. And that's the best way to describe it. And that's what most children are right now that are on these medications. And I understand that symptomatically they help these children fit in. It doesn't make their brains healthier. And so I'm not talking down to the moms who've run out, or to the dads who've run out of options. I get it. We ran out of options. And today I'm going to do my best to bring you options to help you, your brains, and your children's brains a little bit better, because getting to the root cause is where it's all at. We didn't have these options. No one told our family that, man, you could probably change his diet. You could probably get him stop trying to create behavioral modifications to something that's not the behavioral issue. It is a biochemical issue in his brain. No one ever told us that. And so we literally ran out of options of trying to change his behavior through behavioral modifications, therapists, and all that stuff that many of you have done, or many of you been through. And you cannot change behavioral challenges that the root cause is biochemical, essentially biochemical inadequacies, biochemical deficiencies. So today we're going to talk a little bit about those and how do we get all of us get healthier brains. For many reasons. All right. So that being said, there's some of the symptoms. I discussed those with you already. It can be anything from hyperactive disorders to inability to sit still, to being bored, uninterested, and all those different things. So technically, I think every one of us at some point in our lives would fit in with this. Now, the adult onset issue happens. When does it happen? You know when it happens? When life gets really, really busy. That's when it happens. And no doubt you go on a medication and it alters the way that your brain works, and it gives you this hyper focus. And then you get what perceived, and the words being used, so much better. The challenge is this. I watch, and just literally sitting in my office, watching patient after patient. Of course, I get their histories. I see all the drugs and the medication they're on. Even if I'm not even having conversations about it, I still observe the human. I still observe the function and the physiology of the human in front of me. I watch a couple things. So some of the big side effects of the Adderalls and the Ritalins is this. One, it does something that we call, I wrote it down here, it's called emotional blunting. That means you become disconnected. You don't give a shit anymore. it numbs you down, it dumbs you down. And I see it in the people. I see these unemotional people, which is mind-boggling to me, because the truth is, I'm gonna kind of sidetrack here for a moment, but the truth is, in life, the reality is, for us to really, 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 really enjoy life, we have to be able to super emote, super go on the spectrum of full blown into this full blown swing of pendulum all the way to the side of love. And when we do that, I guess you could say, if you're operating, receiving, and giving love on a regular basis, that could be the best thing or the best place in life that you could ever be. Operating out of love, receiving love, giving love could very well be the best thing in life we could ever have. But in order to do that, we have to be willing for the lows of low. If we are not willing to go through the disruption of everything else that isn't operating out of love, we can't have highs. So you can't have highs without lows. And now what we've done by medicating people and changing their behaviors, we inhibit their ability to emote. So some of the things for adult onset ADHD, and everyone's on Adderall, and certainly they can become more productive at work. They can get more, they're more task driven. They can get a little bit more of their to-do list. And we're going to talk about, like, how do we really get this from the root cause? So all of those things, no doubt, those could get a little bit better. The challenge is, what are they giving up? I'll tell you what they're giving up. Caring. They care less. They emote less. Their libido goes down. So they have less emotional drive. So what do you think that does to a marriage? What do you think that does to a relationship between a mom and a daughter, or a mom and a son, or a dad and his son, now that they're on these medications that are altering the way that their minds work? So, all right, you guys just felt my edge a little bit. So with that being said, let's talk about brain health, because universally, there are things we can do. Universally, we know there are so many things. I will tell you this, though. It's not a magic pill. There's no one thing that sweeps down and be like, boom, now you're fixed. But as you listen to this, understand, if you just keep pecking away a little bit at multiple different directions, I'm going to talk about some vitamins, I'm going to talk about some herbs, I'm going to talk about exercise, talk about meditation, I'm going to talk about the diet that we could have. If you just get a little bit better with all of those, then big changes can happen for you. And what are the big changes? You get your brain back. You get your brain back the way that it was designed. So with that being said, let's go a little bit deeper we'll talk a little bit about some of the root causes. What actually happens? Why do we have these behaviors? What's going on where we're starting to have brain fog? We're starting to lose our memory. We're starting to, the inability to focus. How come some people are phenomenal at multitasking, and some of us have a hard time keeping track of the next thing to do, on our to-do list? What's going on? And the root cause of it, and this is why the medications, again, I'm not telling you get on or off your medications. We're talking about why they're missing the root cause. The root cause of these brain dysfunctions is something we call neuroinflammation. Yeah, your brain is inflamed. No doubt about it. We have neuroinflammation. So that becomes the root cause. Now we got to ask a question. The simple question, or the hard question, is, why is that neuroinflammation there? What is going on that's creating this inflammation in my brain and my central nervous system? And these are the things that we're going to tackle today. Then we go to the next step here. What else is involved? And no surprise here, the gut's involved. Your gut is going to play a huge role in your overall brain function. Were these things discussed with me and my family when we were young? Absolutely not. Was I in healthcare at the time? No. I am now, though. So I do have a voice, and my voice here today is sharing with you this. Listen, if you know anybody who's saying that they're starting to lose their memory, they're getting a little brain fog, having a hard time focus, that they have been diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and that they feel so much better when they're on Ritalin, that comes with a sacrifice. And there's ways to get healthy again. So let's keep rolling here. Root cause, no doubt about it. Neuroinflammation. What's the primary cause? Hear me close on this, folks. What is the primary cause of neuroinflammation? The primary cause is, no doubt about it, diet. I'll give you a little anatomy. We'll go science for a second here. Probably 60%, 50, 60%, at least 50, probably closer to 60% of your brain is made up of fat. The outer layer, like the protective layer, what we call the myelin sheath, that myelin, 70% of that, maybe even a little bit more, is made up of cholesterols. So imagine if we had the number one drug in our country, the number one prescribed drug in our country is a drug that inhibits cholesterol production. what 70% of the myelin in your brain is made up of. Imagine that, right? That would be silly because that would be making a lot of people dumb. It literally would be inhibiting their brain function. Do I see this all the time? Yes. So that's what I meant when I say earlier, I had this is personal for me because I see it every day in practice that my folks that are on the statins, especially long-term statins, I just see their brain function tend to slip sooner. They seem to stagnate out sooner. They seem to have a little more brain fog sooner. They seem to stare off into nowhere sooner. They seem to have a little less compassion, quite frankly, in life because we're shrinking their brain. So is there a medication issue in our country? Probably, that's affecting a lot of people's brains. Is there other issues with diet? Yes. And I would say the biggest issue is that carbohydrates and sugar ultimately can, and more often than not, will shrink your brain. And when that brain shrinks, that is when we have dysfunction in the brain. And and the nice thing is I'm going to map this out. We're going to be like, man, I can do these steps. I could take a couple of those omega-3s, those fish oils, and I'll map those out in just a moment. I could take and do the actions, but I will also tell you this. It's going to be important that you look at them all and see how much you can improve each one and then continue to build upon those. So our brain, 70% of the myelin, which is the insulation of the brain, 70% of that is made up of fats. Think of cholesterols. At least 60% of the rest of your brain is made up of fats. So what does that tell us about our diet? If we know that sugar and carbs shrink the brain, we probably should go the opposite direction. Good, healthy fats. And what have we been told for decades, for years, to stay away from fats? I'm talking about the good guys. I'm talking about the ones that you get from eggs and grass-fed burgers and meats and fish and fatty fish and all those good, healthy fats, those omega-3s that we've been talking about and hearing about so much. But we've mostly heard about them from the weirdos, right? The ones who've been saying, well, we got to have good fats in our diet. But we've been so scarred about fats that unfortunately we often just block them out. We don't even know we're doing it on a conscious level, but often we are simply blocking out the fat. So another reason for us to start eating those good healthy things like the eggs and the butter and maybe even some raw milk on occasion, etc. So with that being said, we want to get as many good healthy fats back into our brain as possible. The challenge is for a lot of people emotionally, they don't want fats. They're usually leaning towards sugar and carbs, and it creates this vicious cycle, and it's going downward. That the more carbs and sugar you eat, the more it lights up your brain. Because absolutely, some people are going to fire back at me and say, no, the brain uses sugar. I understand that and understand this. If we invade the brain with only sugars, it goes high, and then after that, it crashes. And it's on that crash is when we start to shrink the brain. So what do we have to make sure that we have? A diet full of good, healthy fats. That's one of the reasons that we heard so many, advocates of things like the ketogenic diet. We'd hear things like ketosis was so good for the brain. Your body, when it was able to use fats as fuel, when it got more good, healthy fats, we see people with their brains functioning better. We saw long-term studies about things like seizures and brain health, and just adding more fats was a way to limit or eliminate things like seizures. All right, so let's keep rolling here. What other types of food should we be eating? Anything with good, healthy fats. That's going to be our primary target. Every one of us can do that. Do we have to decrease the sugars and the carbohydrates? Yes. With that being said, I want to share this with you. We can't just go on a carbohydrate and sugar like elimination diet. That doesn't work. We have to replace them. So the way that our minds work is no one likes to just quit something. So we have to be moving towards something. So whether it be you, your child, or a friend of yours, if you're going to help them move in this direction, it's about replacing. So when we look down at our plate, instead of this big thing of pasta or potatoes, and starches are converted right into sugar, right in the mouth before they even get to the stomach. So we want to make sure that we look down at our plate and we have predominantly proteins. Proteins, all naturally occurring, have fats with them. So you don't even have to obsess about getting more fats. You just have to eat from God's garden. Eat grass-fed burgers. Eat salmon. Wild-caught salmon, of course. Eat some sardines. Eat some eggs. Eat some butter. These things that are naturally being produced by nature are some of the best healthy foods for our brain they could possibly be. And nuts, a lot of nuts will fall into this category as well. So we want to make sure that we are supporting our brain health. Sugar's got to go. The carbs got to go. And here's the very interesting thing. And I don't know why this is so hard for our health community to understand or really wrap their brains around. When you do a history on a patient, you see the ones with the brain fog, you see the ones with all the brain issues, whether it be the ADD, the ADHD, I can't sit still, I'm irritable. You look at their diets, and 9 out of 10 minimum, you see what's taking place in a diet. And they're carbohydrate, sugar-centric diets. So if we're able to make some headway there and we can start to change that diet, I will also tell you this: if you don't, you won't. You're not going to get a healthy brain no matter how much Adderall you go on, no matter how much Ritalin you go on. You will not create a healthy brain. And it's so hard, and I understand this 100%. It is so hard not to be lured into the short-term fix. Is there at times place for the and world? Meaning, I'm going to go on a medication and I'm going to do the healthy stuff so I don't have to stay on the medication. Of course there is. And we have to allow ourselves, but a game plan in knowing how and when it's going to look, what it's going to look like in the future. I have a lot of people that say, well, I'm not going to go on this short term. Well, I'll ask them, what's your plan? And if you don't have one, you don't have one. So it's not a short-term plan. It's a long-term plan. So is there space for times for our medications and our drugs to potentially bridge us? Of course there is. Yet make sure that you have a plan. And I will tell you this also. The person who puts you on the Ritalin, the person that puts you on the medication, most likely does not have the background. I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying most likely it is not their background that is going to also help you lead you out of that issue that's really kind of causing problems. Things like the sugar, the alcohol goes into this category, the carbohydrates, and the poor diet. All right, let's talk a little bit about some of the things you can do. One, I will tell you this. There's a very, very simple test. This does not test for ADD or ADHD, but it talks about brain health. It is a very, very simple, do it at your home test. It's called an omega-3 test. Why would I want you to take this test? Because we do know this. We do know that if you have omega-3s at a level of at least 8% or higher flowing through your bloodstream, that it decreases your overall cause for mortality. We know that people with good high levels of omega-3 have better brain function. So that is one of the simplest tests that I encourage all of us to do. It's probably, literally, if you're listening to this, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. We can literally send it out to you. You prick your finger at home, send it in, you get the results, and right away you know what your level is. And I'm going to tell you want that level at 8% or higher. There is plenty of data and research out there now that shows that children who have ADD and ADHD do phenomenal, definitely have beneficial results, even if they're on medications, of getting better function out of their brain, being better attentive by just going on fish oils. So that would be my number one supplement for you to do. But I'll also tell you to test it. Listen, if you test it, it's motivating factor to be like, wow, it's under 8%. I'm at 3%, 2%, 1%. When you start getting under that 3%, almost always we see clinical signs of brain dysfunction. So if you haven't tested that, and I will tell you this is kind of mind-boggling. I have people that are on fish oils that are still testing low. And why is that? And most of the time it's because they may be on fish oils, but their omega-3s are still competing with all of the omega-6s that are going in there and all the different toxins. So our omega-3s, in a nutshell, they can do a couple things where they help us resolve the inflammatory processes in the brain. They're called resolvins. So every time you have inflammation in the body, especially systemic inflammation, we use in part our omega-3s to support that process. So very, very simple test. You have to have it? No. Yet it's pretty good. If you need sometimes to see things in writing and that there's room for improvement, it's awesome. I test mine regularly. The first time I tested it, I was on fish oils and I recognized that, whoa, I'm not taking enough. And not that I have a bad diet, just wasn't taking enough. I wasn't getting that level up high enough. Maybe it was because of the exercise I do, et cetera. But nonetheless, we've changed that, made very specific types of fish oil that we use, specifically elevating my levels of DHA. DHA is the predominant fat that your brain needs. So anyways, so testing is a very good option for you if you haven't tested anything like that before. Very, very simple at-home test, kind of cool functional medicine test. All right, what else are we going to do? So number one, I'm going to give you a couple different supplements here. And this would be the order that I would go in. And over the years, if you listen to me do a podcast, 10 years ago or whatever we did 10 years ago on ADD or ADHD, most of the time I spoke of two primary things. I'd say fish oil, number one, we need these fatty acids for our brain. Number two, I always talk about the minerals. And the reason the minerals are so important, especially some of the trace minerals, if we don't have them, we can't get all the other reactions out of our nutrition that we want. And most of the time, almost always, again, 9 out of 10, I'm going to say 9.9 out of 10 times, people with brain challenges. And that's not how people usually see it. When we talk about the impulsivity, when we see things like the inability to, sit still in a room, all of the people, again, the inability to multitask, all of these different things, most of the time, their diets are poor. And as a poor diet, you're going to leach out most of your minerals that are really important for your body, things like magnesium and calcium and whatnot. So we need to replenish those, because if we don't replenish those, your brain just really doesn't have the tools it needs. So first of all, I use something called, my first thing would be Prima DHA EPA. It's a very specific type of fish oil. Of course, they're all going to be third-party tested, etc. I'll make sure they're in the show notes. And that's one I'll dose up pretty high on that. I'll probably take 4 capsules a day for most people. And then after that would be, I use a mineral called Mintran. People take it at night. It'll help, which is kind of fun, kind of neat. It'll improve your overall deep sleep. And for those of you who have heard me talk about longevity, deep sleep is the sleep of longevity. When we get that really deep sleep, things like our brain, like our body especially, gets to rehabilitate and increase function in the following day. The next two I'm going to talk about are relatively new. And I am so excited. It's actually motivated me to do this podcast today. I'm so excited about some of the research that's come out about these. There's an herbal company I use. Many of you are familiar with it. They are out of Australia, called MediHerb. And they are essentially in a relationship with a company here in the States called Standard Process. Those two, Standard Process is probably in my opinion, probably the single best whole food manufacturer of vitamins and minerals that we have in the world. Without going too far into that, is because they have their own farms. They have about 900 acres, organic acres, that they make most of their supplements from right then and there, which is beautiful. I don't know that anyone else does that or even gets close to it, and they've been doing it for a really long time, and they have unbelievable components of science, research, and data to back up their formula. So with that being said, so there's Standard Process, they're out of Palmyra, Wisconsin, and then there's MediHerb out in Australia, and the two of them work together, which is fantastic. So MediHerb recently, I guess about 3 years ago in Australia, came out with a new concoction, we'll call it, of herbs, and it's called Neuroregenics. And we started using it in the clinic a couple months ago, and we're already getting bunker type results, which is phenomenal on everything from brain fog to the ability to brain attention deficits. We're getting so many good results with it. It's really bonkers. Now, that being said, what's in it, which is kind of interesting. And it's not only the formulation, but it's how it's delivered to the brain. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Why is it working? The reason that it's working, I'll share some of those herbs in just a moment, it is because it's addressing the root cause, which is neuroinflammation. Folks, all of us that have issues on some days, your brain fog, I can't remember anything today, all of those moments, that is inflammation in your brain. And you can always link it to what you ate the day before. Listen, if you're a clean eater, and if you want to test this theory that I'm talking about today, if you're a clean eater, and you don't normally eat gluten and pasta and all that kind of stuff, listen, go out tonight. Go have a pizza night, a pizza and beer night, and just pay attention to how you think tomorrow. And what do I know? You won't be as sharp. You're not going to be on your A game. You might get through. Maybe no one else notices, but you won't get through. I mean, you won't. You will notice. You will recognize, man, I'm just not sharp today. I'm not feeling it today. Today's not going to be the day that I want to have to give a speech or write a paper or whatnot. So what is that? That is neuroinflammation. No doubt from the gut up into the brain, and you become inflamed in the brain. And when that happens, folks, that's what dumps us down. That's what dumbs us down. That's what gives us all those other symptoms. Again, I can't multitask. I can't think straight. I'm impulsive. I'm a little irritable today. All of those different things. That is neuroinflammation. We have to call it what it is. Does this neuroinflammation eventually affect things like our hormones? Yes. Our metabolic system? Yes. Does it affect our sleep? Absolutely. I go back to those medications, and sometimes you look at those things like Adderall. We know that it decreases appetite. When you decrease your appetite, we're seeing it with some other drugs right now, what is the first thing you're going to stop? You're going to stop your fats and proteins, because they don't taste as yummy as just putting pure sugar in your mouth. So if you decrease your appetite, you are then going to become deficient in nutrients. You become a human that doesn't have enough tools to make good human body parts, especially like brain cells. So we see things like that with these medications. We also see that it causes stomach issues like stomach nausea and sleeplessness. So we take a medication to create focus. Unfortunately, it downregulates our ability to eat, so we have less nutrients in the body, which was part of the root cause. It makes our stomach nauseous, and it makes us sleepy, or I'm sorry, gives us sleepiness, which eventually makes us more tired, which essentially hooks you onto that medication. I digress. All right, back to focus here. So number one, I'll give you omega-3. My particular one is something called Ulprima, DHA, EPA. This is a higher level of DHA than most. Many of you probably heard me talk about cod liver oil. No doubt it's still one of my absolute favorites. It just doesn't have as high levels of DHA and EPA. So for this particular situation, or this, in this case, this is what I like to use, something called Ulprima, DHA and EPA. I like Mintran is the mineral that I typically use. The pills are a little bigger now, which is kind of cool. So you just take one or two at night, which is nice. You sleep like baby, which is great. You have great dreams. And then third and fourth here are two more things. And this is from the latest research that's coming out of Australia. The research they have is absolutely fantastic. And again, I want to talk about mechanism first. That the reason these are working is because it is downregulating neuroinflammation, especially brain inflammation. So these two are things. One called Neuroregenix. I could be wrong, but at the time I'm posting this, it could actually be on back order out of Australia. I know we have some in the office, so you're more than likely, or you're more than welcome to call our office. We can still send you some. Neuroregenix is my number one, and it has a combination of different herbs in it. Curcumin, which is a source of turmeric, boswellia, which many of you are familiar with, is for inflammation, especially any types of joint inflammation. Gotu-kola. If you've ever heard me talk about recovering from injuries, scar tissue, one of my favorite things to prevent scar tissue is gotu-kola. And so you say, why would we use this for the brain? And it's because its ability to help what we call microcirculation. So again, it's a brilliant formula. There's a little berplubin in there, which is another herb that's very effective for the brain. And then they use something called fenugreek, and a very specific technique. I think they've trademarked it, called Fenumat, and the advantage there of what they're doing here with all these different herbs is helping them cross the blood-brain barrier. And as a result of it, we're down regulating the inflammation in your brain, folks. So I'm so excited about this, and so many of my colleagues right now, to the point where I think that I don't even think it's available right now to order in the U.S. because they've sold out all of the initial orders that are coming to the U.S. But I think my office, some other offices probably still have some. But nonetheless, one other thing I want to say here, if you or any one of your family members has anything on the radar when it comes to neurodegenerative diseases, the Parkinson's, the dementias, the Alzheimer's, I typically add one more thing, and I'm just kind of going another step here, and it's ginkgo. Ginkgo, again, why ginkgo? We've heard for years it's so good for memory. The real reason that it works so good for memory is because it has the ability to increase microcirculation. So now we have something crossing the blood-brain barrier. I'm getting bobbled up with my words here today, which is the Neuroregenix. We have ginkgo, which is increasing our ability to have microcirculation. And then you start to change your diet. You bring in more fats. Now we're going to bring the healthy nutrients back into the brain and restore brain function. We're not done here, though. We have to talk about other parts of our lifestyle, which can be two more things. One, exercise. We know that exercising increases the amount of dopamine, really neurotransmitters that are going to be released into the body. Dopamine, serotonin, a very common clinical situation when it comes to people that have issues with ADD and ADHD, is that their diet is bad and they have less exercise. So let's flip this over, folks. This is why this topic semi-excites me, gets me a little riled up, but nonetheless, it does excite me in the fact that we can do so much with just our lifestyle. We can eat better foods, we can exercise, and last but not least, I could almost mention this one first, and I'll tell you why I don't, would be meditation. There are gobloads of data and research showing the benefits of meditation on any type of brain dysfunction, especially the things like ADD and ADHD. So why don't I mention this one first? Here's why. Because clinically, my observation is, in the beginning, there's no chance that I can get my folks who have these challenges without creating some balance first for them to be able to sit and meditate. Do I still encourage it? Yes, I do. Even if it's folks, and this is what I typically recommend, start with a 3-minute meditation. That's it. A 3-minute gratitude meditation. So let me roll through these lists real quickly here, because if you want to change your brain, the brain of maybe of your children, the brain of your mom, your dad, or a friend or family member, here's what we're going to do. One, we're going to get off the sugar and carbs, but we're going to replace them with fat and proteins. So that's it. So we tell them to give up the carbs and sugar and get in the fats and proteins, healthy ones, of course. I'm not talking about French fries and fried chicken and all that kind of stuff. I'm talking about good old fashioned 1-ingredient foods from God's garden, organic, whenever and however we can. And listen, we didn't even get into the chemical component of it today. All the different chemicals and toxins out there. I don't have time for that, but I'm going to say that's almost a given. It's a lot of the reasons we're having so much dysfunction as well. All right, so number one, we're going to change up the food. We're definitely going to exercise. Any way we can start to incorporate a little meditation, game changer. So far, these are just lifestyle things. Then, if you have the resource and you have the desire to go a little bit farther, then you can start to add some things in. Number one, your omega-3s. These are your fish oils. My favorite, O-Prima, DHA, EPA. I will put that in the notes for you. Number two, we're going to get some minerals back because they're depleted. Even if you think you got a good diet, I promise you, because of all the different toxins out there, whether it be in our water, our air, our chemical, whatever it may be, Mintran, phenomenal. You will sleep better, improve some deep sleep. You start to feel like a better human being the following day, which is awesome. Then we're going to move into the category, which I think is the most exciting of all, where we're getting bonker type results and incorporating a little bit of different herbs. And that's with neuroregenics. Again, we'll put these in our show notes for you. And then last but not least, and don't make it least, if you know you want to hunker down and work on your brain, bring in some ginkgo as well. Quality is always king here, and I'll make sure that we give you the resources that we use. All right, folks, that's it. That's all I got today. Hopefully you take this in place in your heart and in your mind and understand if it sounds like I was getting a little edgy today. It just is what it is. Sometimes it is. When I think about this topic and I think about the road that my family and I went down with my younger brother, and then I think about all the Americans and all the patients that I get to treat on a regular basis that are also just being led down a different road. Now, listen, I am not calling out and saying bad or good people in the healthcare profession. I'm saying uninformed. That's really what I'm saying. So now you're informed. Go share it out. Go spread the love. Go share this out best that you can. That being said, always take deliberate action for your mind, your body, overall wellness,